Sham Saradava Nalalidaloka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Sham Saradava Nalalidaloka Naya Karuna Gana Ganatam Taptasya Kalyana Gunanavasya Vande Guru Shicharanara Vrinda Taptasya Kalyana Gunanavasya Vande Guru Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Mahaprabhu ki Tana Nitya Gita Varitramadhyam Manasura Sena Romanchakam Pasru Taranga Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Shri Vigrahara Tana Nityanana Shingaratanama Niramajanado Juktasya Bhaktamsya Niyunjatopi Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavad Prasado Satvana Truptan Haribhakta Shangam Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavad Prasado Satvana Truptan Haribhakta Kridvaiva Trupti Vajato Shadeva Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Shiradikamo Gavayora Para Madhurya Leela Gunarupanamna Shiradikama Gavayora Para Madhurya Leela Pratikshana Swa Tanalolupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Vande Guru Shri Charanara Ne Kunja Yuno Ratikari Siddhai Jayali Bhere Jokte Apekshaneya Nikunja Jono Ratike Tatrati daksha Oti balavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanara Brindam Tatrati daksha Oti balavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanara Sakchadharitena Shamasta Shastre Rukta Tathava Yataiva Sadhavi Sakchadharitena Shamasta Shastre Rukta Tathava Yataiva Pintu Prabodja Priya Eva Tasya Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Kintu Prabodha Priya Eva Tasya Vande Guru Shri Charanara Yasya Prasada Bhagavat Prasada Yasya Prasadam Nagati Kutapi Yasya Prasadam Dayam Stavam Tasya Yasatri Sandhyam Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Dayam Stavam Tasya Yasatri Sandhyam Vande Guru Shri Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Nama Vishnu Padaya Krishna Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravane Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachata Desha Tarine Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravane Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Shri Chaitanya Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hariyaraya Namah, Krishna Jadavaya Namah, Jadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namah, Gopal Govindaram Shri Madhusudan, गिरिधरे गोपीनाथ मदन मोहन श्री चैतन्य नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत सीता हरि गुरु वैष्णव भगवत गीता श्री रूप सनातन भक्त रघुना श्री जीव गोपाल भक्त दस रघुना हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम श्री राधा नील माधव राधा नील माधव राधे जय जगन्नाथ जय बलदेवा जय सुभद्रामा जय सुदर्शन चक्र जय सीताराम जय सीताराम जय सीताराम जय सीताराम सीताराम जय लक्ष्मण हनुमान जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय प्रहलाद महाराज नेताय गौर हरिबो 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 नेताय गौर हरिबो हरे बो निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि बो जय विष्णु पार परमहंस प्रभाजकाचार्य सूत्र सर शिष्य मार्ग डिवाइन ग्रेस अभोचरविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी महाराज शील प्रभुपाद की इस्कॉन प्रतिष्ठा विधि संस्थापक आचार्य वैष्णव शिरोमणि पतित पावन शील प्रभुपाद जी महाराज की जय श्री गौरिया गुरु वर्गापति उद्धार की जय श्री रूप सनातन भक्त रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भक्त दास सर गोस्वामी प्रभु की जय नामाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर जी की जय अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधार शिव सरि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय जय परम दयाल श्री नित्यानंद प्रभु की जय जय प्रेम नाम संकीर्तन एक जनाक प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम श्री सच्चिदानंद श्रीमान गौरंग चैतन्य महाप्रभु गौर हरि मावन नय अवतार की जय गोलोकेर प्रमधान हरि नाम संकीर्तन यज्ञ की जय जुग धर्म हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय बृहद दांग ट्रांसलेटर बुक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन सेवा की जय श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गुप्ता राधा कुंज सम कुंज गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय श्री ब्रज वृंदावन मथुर धाम की जय तेलो शिव श्री राधा नील माधव की जय श्री मायापुर एक चक्र धाम की जय श्री श्री मायापुर श्री पुरुषोत्तम केत्र जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय श्री जगन्नाथ स्वामी बलदेव प्रभु सुभद्रा देवी सुदर्शन चक्र भगवान की जय गंगा में जमुना माई की जय तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी भक्ति देवी की जय श्री मथुरा रानी की जय समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय निताय Gaurari Pramanande. All glories to the Assembly bodies. All glories to the Assembly bodies. All glories to the Assembly bodies. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Guru Shri Gauranga. I Gaura Pramanande Haribo.
Namaste Narashinhaya Prahlada Daine Hiranyakashipurvaksha Shilatankana Kalaye Ito na Shringha Parato na Shringho Yato Yamitato na Shringha Bahir na Shringho Hridaye na Shringha Narshingha Mardim Sharanam Prapadye
Narasingha Mardim Sharanam Prapadye
Tavakara Kamalavare Nakha Advuta Shingham Dalita Hiranyakashipu Dano Bringam Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare
Tavakara Kamalavare Nakam Advuta Singha Dalita Hiranyakashipu Dano Bringam Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Jaya Jagadisha
Jaya Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare
Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Jaya Jagadisha
Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha Lakshmi Narasingha Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha
Jaya Nisingha Nisingha
Jaya Narsingha Dev Jaya Narsingha Dev Narsingha Dev Jaya Narsingha Dev Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Nrsimhadev Bhagavan ki jai, Prahlad Maharaj ki jai, Go Premanandi.
Shri Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Satavatai Namo Namaha. Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Satavatai Namo Namaha. Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Satavatai Namo Namaha. Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai.
Namo Namah Tulasi Krishna Prayasi. Namo Namah
Tulasi Krishna Prayasi. Namo Namo.
I can't. Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Eya Bilasi.
Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Eya Bilasi.
Jito Mara Sharanaloy Tara Vanchapurna Hoy.
Yeto Mara Sharanana Taravanchapuna Kripa
Kori Korotare Vrindavanavasi.
Tumi Kripa Kare Karatare Vrindavanavasi.
Moraya Vilas Vilas Kunja Diovas.
Moraya Vila Vilasa Kunje Diyava
Nayane Ribosada Jugala Ruparasi.
Aminayane Nivosada Jugala Ruparasi.
Enevinnadanadaro Sakiranugata Koro.
Vedanadara Sakiraya no Gatakara
Sevati Karo Diye Koro Nijadasi.
Sevayadi Karadi Karani Jadasi.
Tina Krishna dase koye enamora hoy.
Ila Krishna das ko enamora.
Shri Radha Govinda Preme Sada Dinavasi.
Shri Radha Govinda Preme Sadayena Vasi.
Shri Radha Govinda Preme Sada Dinavasi.
Shri Radha Govinda Preme Sadayena Vasi.
Yani kani cha papani brahmachari kani cha Prakshante pradakshina pade pade.
Dani kani sapakani brahmachari kani sa. Tani tani panna santi pradakshina pade pade.
Yani kani cha papani brahmachari kani cha Tani tani pradakshante pradakshina pade pade.
Dani kani sapakani brahmachari kani sa. Tani tani panna santi pradakshina pade pade.
Yani kani cha papani brahmachari kani cha Tani pranashante pradakshina pade pade.
Dani kani sapakani brahmachari kani sa. Tani tani panna santi pradakshina pade.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Jaya
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani.
Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi.
Jaya Vrinda Devi, Vrinda Devi, Vrinda Devi. Nittai Gaura
Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol.
Nittai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nittai Gaura Haribo. Thank you. Shri Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namo Namaha. Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namo Namaha. Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namo Namaha. Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrindadevi Ki Jai. Oh Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of his wishes fulfilled, bestow your mercy upon him, make him resident of Vrindavan. My desire is that you also give me a residence that grows to Vrindavan now. That's within my vision of all the whole beautiful pastime to Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of Damsels of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your honored servant. This very fallen and lowly servant Krishna praise. May I always sing love with Shri Radha and go. Srimati Tulasi Maharani Vrindadevi Ki Jai. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sitya Sthapan Ki Jai. Ito Rattanam Mahadana Bhagavada Nivapana Shriyakaya Vatandika Vidhanam Vidya Bhaktu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Buddhipanam Purna Mutaswadanam Sarvatmasnam Param Param Jayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Manena Kala Tadrisi Tava Kripaya Bhagavat Mamaki. Ki Jai. Mahabharanayo Krishna Prema Pradaya Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namani Gaur Kishe. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life for repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan moment is the prime benediction for humanity at large. God expressed the rays of the benediction moon It is the life of transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we're always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you have invested all your transcendental energies. There is not even hard and fast rule for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names, but I'm so unfortunate I have no attraction for them. Once you chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than straw in the street, one should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your generous servitor. Yet somehow or other I'm falling in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up? And will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from eyes like torrents of rain, and I feel all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one as Krishna as my Lord, and he should remain so, even if sun doesn't rightly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Shri 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 Kestakam Ki Jai. There are 10 offenses in matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that must be avoided. They are as follows. 1. Blaspheming bodies who dedicate a life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider names of demigods, Lord Shiva or Brahma, to be equal to or independent of the name of Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Vedic literature or literatures and pursuits of Vedic version. 5. Consider the glory of chanting Hare Krishna to the imagination. 6. To give some interpretation of the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities on strength of 8. To consider chanting Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritual activities which are offered in Vedas as fruitive activity, karma kanda. 9. To instruct the fabulous person by the glories of holy name. And 10. To not have complete faith in chanting the holy names and to maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. It also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve desired success. Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our respectful blessings unto all the Vaishnavas, the devotees of the Lord. They are just like desire trees, they can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls.
Srimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Janmadhyasya yato niviyad itaratas chartesu avigyaswarat.
Janmadhyasya yatam vayaditaratascha tesva vidyasvara.
Tene Brahma Hridaya Adikavaye Muyanti Atsurayaha.
Tene Brahma Hridaya Adikavaye Muyanti Suraya.
Tejo Vari Midam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargomisha.
Tejo Varimrida Jata Vinimayo Jatra Trisargomusya.
Damna Svina Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dimahi.
Dhamna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyang Param Dhimahi.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva,
O my Lord Shri Krishna, son of
O
Vasudeva,
all-pervading personality of Godhead,
O all-pervading personality of
I
Godhead,
offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
offer my respectful obeisances
I
unto you.
meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute
I
truth
meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth
and the primeval cause of all causes,
and the cause of all
of the
causes,
creation, sustenance, and destruction of manifested universes.
of the creation, sustenance, destruction, and manifested universe.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all
He is
manifestations.
directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
And he's independent because there's no other cause beyond
And
him.
he is independent because there is no other cause beyond
It is
him.
he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of
But he is the
Brahmaji,
only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge into the heart of Brahma,
the original living
the original
being.
living being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion,
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed
as one is
into illusion.
bewildered by the illusory representations
As one is bewildered by the illusory representation
of water seen on fire or land seen on water.
water seen the fire, land seen water.
Only because of him do the material universes,
Only because of him do the material universe
temporarily manifested by reactions to the three modes of nature,
temporarily manifested by the reaction of the three modes
appear
of nature,
factual although they're unreal.
appear factual, although they are
I therefore
unreal.
meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna,
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord
who
Shri
is
Krishna,
eternally existent in the transcendental
who
abode,
is eternal existence,
which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world.
which is forever free from the illusory
I
representation.
meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute
Dharma projita kaitra gotra,
Dharma Pujita Kaitavutta
paramo nirmatsaranam satam,
Brahmo Nimasharanam
vedyam vastavam atra vastu,
Vedyam Vastavamastru Vastu
shivadam tapa trayon mulanam,
Shivadam Tapu Tuyamlanam
Shrimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite,
Shrimad Bhagavate Mahamuni
Kimba Purir Ishvara,
Kimba Parirish
Sadyo Hridaya Vrujyate Tra,
Sadyarudya Vridyati
Kriti Bihi Sususavistakshana,
Kriti Vish Shushuvistakana,
completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
rejecting all religious activities which are material.
This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest
This
truth,
Bhagavad Puran propounds a high truth,
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in
The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
The highest truth, the reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of
Such
all.
truth uproots the threefold
Such a
mysteries.
truth uproots threefold miseries.
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity
This is beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva's maturity.
is sufficient in itself for God
It's
realization.
sufficient itself for God to be
What is the
realized.
need of any other scripture?
What is the need of the other scripture?
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
As soon as one attentive and submissively hears the message of
by
Bhagavatam,
this culture of
by
knowledge,
this culture of
the
knowledge,
Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
the Supreme Lord is established within his
Nigama
heart.
kalpatarur galitam phalam,
Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam,
sukha mukad amrita dragya
Shuka
sangitam,
mukhar mridadrava sangitam,
pibata Bhagavatam rasamalayam,
Vibhata Bhagavatam Rasamayam,
mohor ahor raskabhu vibhavaka.
Mura Horasika Bhavavu.
O expert and thoughtful man, relish Srimad Bhagavatam,
O expert and thoughtful man, relish my
the
Bhagavatam.
mature fruit of the desired true Vedic literatures,
The mature fruit, the desired tree, is very glorious.
it emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami.
It emanated from the lips of Shishukadev Goswami.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
And for this place becomes even more tasteful.
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
Although its nectarin juice was all relishable for all,
including liberated souls.
including liberated souls.
Shinvatam Swakata Krishna,
Shambhatam Swakata Krishna,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Hridyantaksto Hyabadrani,
Vidyantastu Hyavadra,
Vidunati Srihit Satam.
Vidunoti Srisatam.
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
To hear about Krishna from the Vedic
or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
or to hear from you directly through the Bhagavad Gita.
is itself righteous activity.
Itself a righteous activity.
And for one who hears about Krishna,
And for one who hears about Krishna,
Lord Krishna who is dwelling in everyone's
Lord
heart,
Krishna is dwelling within everyone's
acts
heart.
as a best wishing friend,
Acts as the best wishing
and
friend.
purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
And purifies the body who constantly engages in hearing of him.
Nasta presu abhadresu
Nasta praishva bhadrishu
nityam bhagavata sevaya
Nityam Bhagavata Seva
bhagavati tamasloke
Bhagavati Uttama Shloke
bhaktir bhavati naistaki.
Bhakti Bhavati Nastiti.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
In this way, the devotee naturally develops dormant transcendental knowledge.
As he hears more about about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
as he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
and from the devotees,
and from the
he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
he becomes fixed in devotional service of the Lord.
Tadrajastamo bhava
Tadarajastamo bhava
kamalobhadayaschi
kamalobhadayasche
itairanavidam stitvam
Chaitaiteranavidam
sattve prasidati.
Stitam Sattve Prasidati.
By development of devotional service,
By development of devotional service,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance,
one becomes free from the modes of passion and ignorance.
and thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
And thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
Evam prasana manaso
Evam prasana manasa
bhagavad bhakti yogitaha
Bhagavad Bhakti Yoga
bhagavad tattva vijnanam
Bhagavad Tattva
mukta
Jnana
sangasya jayate.
Mukta Sangasya Jayate.
When these impurities are wiped away,
When these impurities are
the
walked away,
candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness,
the candidate remains steady in his position of pure
becomes
goodness,
enlivened by devotional service,
becomes enlivened by
and
devotional
understands the
service,
science of God perfectly.
understand the science of God perfectly.
Vijite hridaya granthis
Vijate Hridaya Granthi
chidyante sarvasamsaya
Chidyante Sarvasamsaya
shriyante chasya karmani
Chidyante Sasya
krista
Karmani
eva admanishvare.
Druta Eva Manishvare.
Thus, bhakti yoga serves the heart not of material affection,
Thus, the Bhakti Yoga serves the heart of material affection
and enables one to come at once to the stage of samsaya on samagram,
and enables one to come at once to the stage of Samshaya Samagramam,
understanding of the supreme absolute truth personality of Godhead.
understanding the supreme absolute truth personality of Godhead.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna, from his devotee in Krishna consciousness,
can one understand the science of Krishna.
can one understand the science of Krishna.
Shri Guru Vastika prayers ki jai. The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean mercy, just as a cloud pours water on a forest fire to extinguish it.
The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy, just as clouds pours water on the forest fire to extinguish it.
So the spiritual master extinguishes the blazing fire of material existence.
So the material, deliver material afflicted world
Um,
in the blazing fire of material existence.
I, from my respectable basis of the lotus feet of such a spiritual master, is an ocean of auspicious qualities.
Offer my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet of such a spiritual master who is an ocean of species quality.
Chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments.
Chanting the holy name, dancing, singing, playing musical
The
instruments.
spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
The spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan moment that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Because he is relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his mind.
Because he relishing the medals of pure devotion within his mind.
Sometimes his hair stands on end.
Sometimes the hair stands on the
He
end.
feels quivering in his body,
He feels quivering in his
and
body.
tears flow from his eyes like waves.
And tears flow from his eyes like
I
waves.
offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual
The
master.
spiritual master is always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Radha and Krishna.
Spiritual master is always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Radha and
He
Krishna.
also engages his disciples in such worship.
He also engages disciples in such worship.
They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments,
They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments,
clean their temple,
clean the temple,
and perform other similar worship of the Lord.
and perform other similar
I
worship.
offer my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet of such a spiritual master.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual
The
master.
spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food.
The spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food.
Analyzes that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked.
Analyze that which is licks, drink, sight.
When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavad Prasada,
When a spiritual master sees that his bodies are satisfied by eating Bhagavad Prasad,
he is
he
satisfied.
is satisfied.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual
The
master.
spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes of Radhika and Madhava.
The spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastime, Radhika and Madhava,
And their qualities, names, and forms.
and their qualities, names, and
The
forms.
spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment.
The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every
I
moment.
offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual
The
master.
spiritual master is very dear because he is expert in assisting gopis who at different times make different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs.
The spiritual master is very dear because he's the gopis with different time and different tasteful arrangement for perfection
within the groves of Vrindavana.
within the groves of
I offer my most humble obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual
my
master.
respectful obeisance unto the Lotus feet of such a spiritual master.
The spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord because he is the most confidential servitor of the Lord.
The spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord because he's the most confidential servitor of the Lord.
This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all
This
authorities.
is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities.
Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master as a bona fide representative of Shri Hare Krishna.
Therefore, I offer my humble obeisance unto the Lord to such a spiritual master who is a bona fide representative of Sri Hare Krishna.
By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna.
By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna.
Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement.
Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement.
Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master.
Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master.
At least 3 times a day, I should offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master.
At least 3 times a day, I should offer my respectful obeisance unto the Lotus feet of my spiritual master.
Shri Brahma Samhita Ki Jai. Ishwara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Nadiradir Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam.
Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachirananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govinda Sarva Karana Karana
Chintamani Prakara Sadmasu Kalpa Vriksha.
Chintamani Prakara Sadma Sukalpa Vriksha
Laksha Vrite Susuravira Vipalayantam.
Laksha Vite Suradhira Vipalayantam
Lakshmi Sahasra Satasam Brahma Sevyamanam.
Lakshmi Sahasra Satasam Brahma Sevyamanam
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami.
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Venam Kvanantam Aravinda Dalaya Taksham.
Venu Kvanantam Aravinda Dayala Taksham
Parhavatam Samasitam Udasundarangam.
Param Vatar Masitam Sudasundarangam
Kandarpakoti Kamaniya Vishesha Shobham.
Nandarpa Koti Kamaniya Vishesha Shobham
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami.
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Alola Chandra Kalasadvana Malyavamsi.
Alola Chandra Kalasarva Mamdam Yavamsi
Ratnam Gadam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam.
Danang Gadam Pranaya Keli Kalavila
Shyamam Tribangalalita Nita Prakasam.
Syamam Tribhanga Lalita Niyata Prakasham
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami.
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vrittimanti.
Angani Yasha Sakalendriya Vrittimanti
Pasyanti Panti Kalyanti Chiram Jaganti.
Pasyanti Panti Kalayanti Chiram Jaganti
Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya.
Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami.
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam.
Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam
Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha.
Adyam Purana Purusham Navajovanam Cha
Vedesu Durlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhakto.
Vedeshu Durlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhakto
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami.
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Pantastu Koti Satavatsara Sampragamyo.
Pantastu Koti Satavatsara Sampragamyo
Vayoratapi Manaso Munipungamanam.
Vayoratapi Manaso Muni Pungavanam
Sopyasti Yat Prapadasim Yavichintya Tatve.
Sokyasti Yat Prapada Chinti Tuchita
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami.
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Ekopya Sora Chayitam Jagananda Kotim.
Ekvapya Sura Chichitum Jagananda Koti
Yat Shakti Rasti Jagananda Chaya Yadanta.
Yat Shakti Yasti Jagananda Chaya Yadanta
Andantaram Staparamanu Chayantaram Stam
Adantaram Staparamanu Chayantarastam
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Yad Bhava Bhavita Diyo Manajastataiva
Yadbhava Bhavidu Diyo Munijastataiva
Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhushaha
Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhusha
Shuktayameva Nigama Pratitaistuvanti
Shukteriyam Eva Nigama Pratitaistuvanti
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami
Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 5, Text number 10. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Sorry. Translation. Whatever you have spoken about me is not false, because unless and until one is aware of the personality of Godhead, who is the ultimate truth beyond me, one is sure to be illusioned by observing my powerful activities. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The frog in the well. Logic illustrates that a frog residing in the atmosphere and boundary of a well cannot imagine the length and breadth of the gigantic ocean. Such a frog, when informed of the gigantic length and breadth of the ocean, first of all, does not believe that there is such an ocean. And if someone assures him that factually there is such a thing, the frog then begins to measure it by imagination, by means of pumping its belly as far as possible, with the result that the tiny abdomen of the frog bursts and the poor frog dies without any experience of the actual ocean. Similarly, the material scientists also want to challenge the inconceivable potency of the Lord by measuring Him with their frog-like brains and their scientific achievements, but at the end, they simply die unsuccessfully like the frog. Sometimes, a materially powerful man is accepted as God, or the incarnation of God, without any knowledge of the factual God. Such a material assessment may be gradually extended, and the attempt may reach to the highest limit of Brahmaji, who is the topmost living being within the universe, and has a duration of life unimaginable to the material scientist. As we get information from the most authentic book of knowledge, the Bhagavad Gita, 8.17, Brahmaji's one day and night is calculated to be some hundreds of thousands of years on our planet. This long duration of life may not be believed by the frog in the well, but persons who have a realization of the truths mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita accept the existence of a great personality who creates the variegatedness of the complete universe. It is understood from the revealed scriptures that the Brahmaji of this universe is younger than all the other Brahmas in charge of the many, many universes beyond this, but none of them can be equal to the personality of Godhead. Naradaji is one of the liberated souls, and after his liberation he was known as Narad. Otherwise, before his liberation, he was simply a son of a maidservant. The questions may be asked why Naradaji was not aware of the Supreme Lord, and why he misconceived Brahmaji to be the Supreme Lord, although factually he was not. A liberated soul is never bewildered by such a mistaken idea. So why did Naradaji ask all these questions just like an ordinary man with a poor fund of knowledge? There was such bewilderment in Arjuna also, although he is eternally the associate of the Lord. Such bewilderment in Arjuna, or in Narada, takes place by the will of the Lord so that other, non-liberated persons may realize the real truth and knowledge of the Lord. The doubt arising in the mind of Narada about Brahmaji's becoming all-powerful is a lesson for the frogs in the well, that they may not be bewildered in misconceiving the identity of the personality of Godhead, even by comparison to a personality like Brahma. So what to speak of ordinary men who falsely pose themselves as God or an incarnation of God? The Supreme Lord is always the Supreme. And as we have tried to establish many times in these purports, no living being, even up to the standard of Brahma, can claim to be one with the Lord. One should not be misled when people worship a great man as God after his death as a matter of hero worship. There were many kings like Lord Ramachandra, the king of Ayodhya, but none of them are mentioned as God in the revealed scriptures. To be a good king is not necessarily the qualification for being Lord Rama, but to be a great personality like Krishna is the qualification for being the personality of Godhead. If we scrutinize the characters who took part in the Battle of Kurukshetra, we may find that Maharaj Yudhisthira was no less a pious king than Lord Ramachandra, and by character study, Maharaj Yudhisthira was a better moralist than Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna asked Maharaj Yudhisthira to lie, but Maharaj Yudhisthira protested. But this does not mean that Maharaj Yudhisthira could be equal to Lord Ramachandra or Lord Krishna. The great authorities have estimated Maharaj Yudhisthira to be a pious man, but they have accepted Lord Rama or Krishna as the personality of Godhead. The Lord is therefore a different identity in all circumstances, and no idea of anthropomorphism can be applied to him. The Lord is always the Lord, and a common living being can never be equal to him. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Whatever you have spoken about me is not false, because unless and until one is aware of the personality of Godhead, who is the ultimate truth beyond me, one is sure to be illusioned by observing my powerful activities. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. What's interesting, there are many interesting points in this purport, but right away one point stands out, and that is, Prabhupada says, the Supreme Lord is always the Supreme, as we have tried to establish many times in these purports. No living being, even up to the standard of Brahma, can claim to be one with the Lord. Well, this statement is very interesting because if you understand this statement, then you will not be tricked by false imitators. And then again in the last sentence of this purport, Prabhupada says, the Lord is always the Lord. A common living being can never be equal to him. So if we look at Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd Canto, 5th chapter, verse number 7, the same point is made, and Prabhupada is again stressing it in this verse, just like it says, verse 7. In verse 7, 257. Yeah. So it says, following in the footsteps of Sri Narada Muni, one should not blindly accept his spiritual master as God himself. A spiritual master is duly respected on a par with God, but a spiritual master claiming to be God himself should at once be rejected. Narada Muni accepted Brahma as the supreme due to Lord Brahma's wonderful acts in creation. But doubts arose in his mind when he saw that Lord Brahma also worshipped some superior authority. The supreme is supreme, and he has no worshipable superior. Okay, so the main point being made here is that someone doesn't become God by great acts or someone doesn't become God because there's somebody's guru, and then after they die, the disciples decide, oh, we should worship our guru because he was God for us. So this has happened a lot in history, especially after Lord Chaitanya's disappearance. The Goswamis proved that he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So people started, people started imitating this. Like, for example, you have Swami Narayan. You have so-called Paramahamsa Ramakrishna. You have Aurobindo, and you have Sriji Sai Baba, and you have the other Sai Baba, Pataputra Sai Baba. All these people, after their death, they're being elevated by the disciples to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because they were a pious, very pious person, or they were a sadhu, or because one time somebody came to see them, and the Guru said something that indicated he knew something very private about the disciple. So immediately the disciple says, oh my God, he has to be God. And they write a book. Well, he was able to see this. How did he know this? It's only because he's God. All kinds of nonsense things. In the case of Sridi Sai Baba, he, of course, was living in a abandoned mosque. He was a Muslim. But he acted like a genuine sadhu. And he decided, when he became a little popular and there was some support, most of the support was from the Hindus, not from the Muslims. There might have been one or two Muslims, but most of his supporters were Hindus. He decided to transform the mosque into a temple for Gopal Krishna. This is in his Sai Charitra, the book about his life. And but he died before the temple was finished and the deity established. And so instead of establishing the deity of Krishna, they made a deity of Sridi Sai Baba and artificially promoted him to the stage of being God. So what's interesting is Nalini's mother and father, the father especially, he opened the temple of Sridi Sai Baba in his village. So when they came here, his wife was initiated. He wasn't initiated. But eventually he started chanting Hare Krishna a little bit, right? And he heard some lectures that I gave, and where I said clearly that there's only one God. That's Krishna. You don't become God because people vote you or consider that you're God. And so fast forward to a couple days ago, I had a phone call from them, and they were telling me how they put a picture of Krishna above the deity of Sridi Sai Baba in their temple. It's like his temple. He opened the temple in the village, right? And he sort of organizes the worship. So he was very happy about that. And I said, okay, now, I said, let's go to the Sridi Sai Baba Charitra. And there explains that when he wanted to make that mosque into a temple, he wanted to establish the deity of Krishna, or Gopal Krishna. So I said, now, not only you put the picture above Sridi Sai Baba, but you you install the deity, just like Sriti Sai Baba wanted of Krishna in the temple, and you explain to everyone that Sriti Sai Baba is Guru, not God. But he's offered all the respect of God. So they said they were going to do that. So let's see if that happens. And but that would be the correct thing to do. It's right in the Charitra. It's right there. He wanted it to be a temple of Krishna. So make it a temple of Krishna and accept him as Guru. Right? The Guru who is instructing them to install the deity and worship the deity, rather than worship him as God. You see how things happen. This after the death, the elevating someone to the position of God is not bona fide at all. You don't become God. God is always God. That's what Prabhupada is saying here. The Supreme is always the Supreme. The Lord is the Lord always. It's not that he was not the Lord before and now he became the Lord because we promoted him to that position. Okay. So that's an extremely important point that Prabhupada is making. And he says there's no idea of anthropomorphism. Well, anthropomorphism means that you give human characteristics to something. Like, for example, you have, the Aryan invasion of India, which is a false theory started by the British, mostly the British evangelists who were trying to make everybody in India Christians. They came up with this theory with the help of Max Muller, who was also a European and German, that to subordinate the Vedic time concept to the Christian time concept. The Christian time concept says that the world was created about 5,000 years ago. Now everybody knows that's a bunch of nonsense. The world was not created 5,000 years ago. And eventually the Christians have had to admit that that's a false timeline. But back in the 19th century, there was still a prevalent idea. So in order to subordinate the Vedic timeline, which goes back hundreds and millions of years ago, to the Christian timeline of 5,000 years ago, they came up with this theory, this false theory of the Aryan invasion. In other words, people from the country of my lineage, meaning the Caucasian mountains. That's why they're called Caucasians, right? White people. They invaded India and brought with them an obscure pastoral god named Krishna. They brought him into India, North India, and they pushed the Dravidians to the south, the dark-skinned Dravidians to the south. And then by some chance occurrence, they promoted this obscure rural or pastoral deity, Krishna, to God. That's their theory, right? So, it completely ignores the Vedic timeline. It completely ignores the whole history of Vedic history, and makes up this lie. It's basically a huge lie, and it's still taught today in India. Did you learn about the Aryan invasion of India in school?
Yeah, and also about a decade ago when I met someone who is a professor in university, and I got exposed to all scriptures, and I was sharing with him, and he was like, "This is history."
He's an Indian, right?
He's an Indian.
Yeah, completely.
Talking about the Aryan invasion, before the current version was written, it was always three varnas, and then later it has been modified to four varnas, because the Aryans wanted the South Indians to be Shudras. So he's describing some
Yeah.
theory like that.
Yeah, well, he's probably a member of the what do you call that? South Indian atheists. What's their name? The Dravidians, yeah. The Dravidian Party. There's a political party called the Dravidian Party, and they're Hindus who have become complete atheists, and they hate Hinduism. And it caused so much trouble in Tamil Nadu, to Vaishnavas. Okay, so all these things are false. You see, it's not that the Western philosophers and scientists have come up with all these false things. This is everything nonsense begins in India and then spreads around the world, right? The Indians are so clever; they'll keep coming up with all these phony ideas, So we need to clear up all these misconceptions by carefully reading Srimad Bhagavatam, which explains the real history of the world. And Srimad Bhagavatam and Mahabharata explains the real history of the world, and the Puranas. Okay, so that's one point in this. The Lord is always the Lord. You don't become the Lord because people vote you in, that you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or people, out of sentiment worship you like God. No. Okay, so another major point here is the bewilderment of Arjuna and also of Narada. Now, Arjuna and Narada are eternal companions or eternal associates of Krishna. So how could it be that they are, let's say, in illusion? Well, this is explained in the 4th chapter, 11th verse of Bhagavad Gita, and in many other places. So we're going to go over this very quickly. And it says in the 4th chapter, 11th verse, 4th chapter, 4th verse, 4th chapter, 4th verse. And this is where Arjuna is questioning Krishna, how come you say that you instructed the sun god in the beginning of time? Well, you're our relative. You only appear to be like 100 years old. This is very confusing for me. So, Krishna says, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Bahuni Me Vyatitani Janmani Tavacha Arjuna Tanyaham Veda Sarvani Natvam Veda Parantapa. The personality of God has said, many, many births you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot, O subduer of the enemy. So, in the purport, we won't read the whole purport because it's a very long one, but it says, the Lord is described in Brahma Samhita as infallible, achyuta, which means that he never forgets Krishna, or never forgets himself, even though he is in material contact. Therefore, the Lord and the living entity can never be equal in all respects, even if the living entity is as liberated as Arjuna. Although Arjuna is a devotee of the Lord, he sometimes forgets the nature of the Lord, but by the divine grace, a devotee can at once understand the infallible condition of the Lord, whereas a non-devotee or demon cannot understand this transcendental nature. Consequently, these descriptions in the Gita cannot be understood by demoniac brains. Krishna remembered acts which were performed by him millions of years before, but Arjuna could not, despite the fact that both Krishna and Arjuna are eternal in nature. We may also note herein that a living entity forgets everything due to his change of body, but the Lord remembers because he does not change his Satchitananda body. He is Advaita, which means there is no distinction between his body and himself. Now, that right there is a major statement, because the real meaning of Advaita is that there's no difference in the body and the soul. In the case of Krishna and other liberated souls. But for the mundane living entities like us, including the so-called big scientists and philosophers and teachers and so forth, there's a difference between the body and the soul. Therefore, it's almost impossible to understand Krishna when you're suffering from that duality of the body-soul, that they're two different things. So how do the materialists try and accommodate that duality? They say, well, there's only the body, that's all. If there is a soul, it develops like the body through material development, evolution, you know. In other words, everything is material, including the soul. So, therefore, how can they understand anything about Krishna when there's a tremendous, dramatic difference between his body, when there's no difference between his body and his soul? Whereas for a human being, there's this dramatic, extreme difference between the body and the soul. Okay, and then it says, but the Lord remembers because he does not change his Satchitananda body. He is Advaita, which means there is no distinction between his body and himself. Everything in relation to him is spirit, whereas the conditioned soul is different from his material body. And because the Lord's body and self are identical, his position is always different from that of the ordinary living entity, even when he descends to the material platform. The demons cannot adjust themselves to this transcendental nature of the Lord, which the Lord himself explains in the following verse. Ajopi san avyayatma bhutanam ishvaro bisam pakritim swam adastaya sambhavami atmamayaya. Although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, the Lord of all living entities, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. This is inconceivable. And if you read translations of the Bhagavad Gita by mundane people, they always mess this verse up, the translation of this verse. You know, they come up with some other meaning because, as it says here, that the demons cannot adjust themselves to the transcendental nature of the Lord, which the Lord himself explains in the next verse. In other words, when he appears in his original form, the two-armed form, that form is eternal. And there's no difference between Krishna and his body, whereas the materialists, like Dr. Radha Krishnan, who was president of India at one time, and he was a big writer about Vedas, he always differentiates between the Krishna and his body, as do all the other demons. So, in the purport, again, it's the long purport, but we'll just read a few parts of it. We never see a picture of Krishna in old age because he never grows old like us, although he is the oldest person in the whole creation, past, present, and future. Neither his body nor his intelligence ever deteriorates or changes. Therefore, it is clear that in spite of his being in the material world, he is the same unborn, eternal form of bliss and knowledge, changeless in his transcendental body and intelligence. Factually, his appearance and disappearance is like the sun's rising, moving before us, and then disappearing from our eyesight. When the sun is out of sight, we think that the sun is set, and when the sun is before our eyes, we think that the sun is on the horizon. Actually, the sun is always in its fixed position, but owing to our defective, insufficient senses, we calculate the appearance and disappearance of the sun in the sky. And because Lord Krishna's appearance and disappearance are completely different from that of an ordinary, common living entity, it is evident that he is eternal, blissful knowledge by his internal potency, and he's never contaminated by material nature. The Vedas also confirm that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is unborn, yet he still appears to take his birth in multi-manifestations. The Vedic supplementary literatures also confirm that even the Lord appears to be taking his birth, he is still without change of body. In the Bhagavatam, he appears before his mother as Narayana with 4 hands, and the decorations are the 6 kinds of full opulences. His appearance in his original eternal form is his causeless mercy bestowed upon the living entities so that they can concentrate on the Supreme Lord as he is, and not on mental concoctions or imaginations which the impersonalist wrongly thinks the Lord forms to be. So, when he appears in his four-armed form first to Vasudeva and Devaki, Devaki is afraid. She's saying, "Oh my God, he's appearing as God, as Narayana. Please change your form. You should appear like it's just an ordinary human being with two arms and like that." And then the Lord does that, but that is his original form, from which Narayana comes. But it bewilders people because although he's bluish, dark bluish tint, still it appears that he is an ordinary human being, although he's not. You see, and that's his original body, that the original form of Sham Sundar, the Tribhanga, the three bending form, holding the flute with the peacock feather. That's his original form from which everything else emanates. So these things are not understood by materialists. So someone who has fundamental difference between his body and his soul cannot understand the body of Krishna, in which there's no difference between his body and his soul. See? So, let's give an example that we may be able to understand. Well, Prabhupada says the sun appears to rise and appears to set, but the sun is always there, fixed in its position. We see it like that because we're in a relative position, because the earth is rotating on its axis, and then sometimes we see the sun, and sometimes we don't see the sun. Right? There's a period of the day where we don't see the sun. There's a period of the day we do see the sun. But we mistake that to mean that the sun sets and comes back again, or the sun dies and then is reborn again. In ancient times, they used to believe the sun actually died and then it came back to life again. See? So we can see how from one position everything is perfectly clear, and from another position there is confusion, because they have limited vision. Okay, so therefore sometimes it appears that Arjuna or Narada Muni are in illusion, but they're never in illusion. So this is also explained in the first canto. It's also explained in the Bhagavad Gita, 10th canto, 14th and 15th verse. Let's see what it says. Bhagavad Gita, 10th chapter, 14th and 15th verse, where it says, the Supreme Lord Krishna can be known by persons who are in a relationship with him through the discharge of devotional service, like Arjuna and his followers. Well, we are his followers, right? Persons of demoniac or atheistic mentality cannot know Krishna. Mental speculation that leads one away from the Supreme Lord is a serious sin. And one who does not know Krishna should not try to comment on Bhagavad Gita. Well, we see how sinful people are in this age. They're speculating to lead other people away from the Supreme Lord. So in school, one of the kids said, "Oh, excuse me, Miss so-and-so, but Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead." Oh, well, that's your religious belief. That has nothing to do with science. It's okay if you believe like that, but we're dealing with science here. So for us, everything is material. And the whole spirit world is something that of imagination to help people of weaker minds to sort of accommodate to suffering. So it's kind of nonsense is going on every day in the schools, right? They only deal with matter. They don't understand. They don't accept spirit as actually something that exists. Everything is material. If there is a spirit, it's something that developed through evolution of matter. So, therefore, Prabhupada says, Bhagavad Gita is the statement of Krishna, and since it is the science of Krishna, you notice he's mentioning science of Krishna in many different places, right? We've mentioned it in 2 purports today that I've read, right? And since it is the science of Krishna, and we repeat it every day in the prayers that we say in the morning, therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his pure devotee can one understand the science of Krishna. See, this is a real science. What they teach in the schools is not science. It's all speculation, right? So, it should be understood from Krishna as Arjuna understood it. It should not be received from the atheistic persons. This is why, subjecting these kids to being associated with these demons like 8 to 9 hours a day, and they're hearing all this gobbledygook nonsense, is actually criminal, and it should not be done. So it says here, as stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.11, the supreme truth is realized in 3 aspects: as impersonal Brahman, localized Paramatma, and at last as the Supreme Personality Godhead. Let's see. So, thus, the last sentence says, thus, the truth about Krishna is established in this verse. This is 10th chapter, 15th verse, which says, Arjuna says, indeed, you alone know yourself by your own internal potency, O Supreme Person, origin of all, Lord of all beings, God of gods, Lord of the universe. And it says, thus the truth about Krishna is established in this verse by the realization of Arjuna, and we should follow in the footsteps of Arjuna to understand Krishna as he is. So, who should we be listening to learn the truth about life? Arjuna, as he speaks in Bhagavad Gita, and Krishna, who's speaking about himself in the Bhagavad Gita. We shouldn't listen to all these old nonsense people, because they're just going to mislead us away from Krishna, and that is considered a very serious sin. Anything that leads us away from Krishna is a serious sin. Okay, so now, again, so we just read from the 10th chapter, 14th, 15th verse. Now if we go to Srimad Bhagavatam 1.9.36, let's see what it says there. 1.9.36. When Arjuna was seemingly polluted by ignorance upon observing the soldiers and commanders before him on the battlefield, the Lord eradicated his ignorance by delivering transcendental knowledge. May his lotus feet always remain the object of my attraction. So, in the purport, it's a very interesting purport. It says, the kings and commanders were to stand in the front of the fighting soldiers. That was the system of actual fighting. The kings and commanders were not so-called presidents or ministers of defense as they are today. They would not stay home while the poor soldiers or mercenaries were fighting face to face. This may be the regulation of modern democracy, but when actual monarchy was prevailing, the monarchs were not cowards elected without consideration of qualification. As it was evident from the Battle of Kurukshetra, all the executive heads of both parties, like Drona, Bhisma, Arjuna, and Duryodhana, were not sleeping. All of them were actual participants in the fighting, which was selected to be executed at a place away from the civil residential quarters. This means that the innocent citizens were immune from all effects of fighting between the rival royal parties. The citizens had no business in seeing what was going to happen during such fighting. They were to pay 1/4 of their income to the ruler, whether he be Arjuna or Duryodhana. All the commanders of the parties on the battlefield of Kurukshetra were standing face to face, and Arjuna saw them with great compassion and lamented that he had to kill his kinsmen on the battlefield for the sake of the empire. He was not at all afraid of the giant military phalanx presented by Duryodhana, but as a merciful devotee of the Lord, renunciation of worldly things was natural for him, and thus he decided not to fight for worldly possessions. But this was due to a poor fund of knowledge, and therefore it is said here that his intelligence became polluted. His intelligence could not be polluted at any time because he was a devotee and constant companion of the Lord, as is clear in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Well, we just read that. Apparently, Arjuna's intelligence became polluted because otherwise there would not have been a chance to deliver the teachings of Bhagavad Gita for the good of all polluted conditioned souls engaged in material bondage by the conception of the false material body. The Bhagavad Gita was delivered to the conditioned souls of the world to deliver them from the wrong conception of identifying the body with the soul and to reestablish the soul's eternal relation with the Supreme Lord. Atma Vidya, or transcendental knowledge of himself, of Krishna, was primarily spoken by the Lord for the benefit of all concerned in all parts of the universe. So, in other words, Arjuna is not really an illusion, but he seems to be, so that, and Narada Muni seems to be an illusion, in order for Krishna to speak the absolute truth about the reality of things. So, therefore, Prabhupada says, so this conception of the false material body as being the self, which is taught in schools, they're actually teaching this. This is taught, in fact, if you look on Drudge today, there's an article about cryonics. Okay, cryonics means they freeze your body right before you die, so that in the future they can bring you back to life and heal your sickness once they figure out, how to overcome death. The whole thing is complete nonsense. But do you see that article? It's on the Drudge Report. It's about cryonics. It's about a person who actually died. So normally you're supposed to freeze the person right before they die. The person actually died. His body started to become, corrupted or deteriorate, but he still insisted before his death that he be taken and frozen, and now the people who, the professionals who freeze bodies, they were like lamenting a little bit. His body is junk right now. When we bring him back to life, his body is dead. But so in a rush they froze his brain and ignored freezing the body because it was a waste of time. And the guy was saying, actually, we should do this to everybody because there's no guarantee that the body's going to be alive when we bring him back. Who would want to have that old body anyway, right? So he's saying that we shouldn't waste our time trying to freeze bodies. We should just freeze the brain and give it a new body when in the future. So all this is speculation. It's all nonsense, right? Do you see it? Okay, read a little bit about this. You see how silly and ridiculous people are. This is news, right? News about the silliness of these nonsense people. Go ahead.
So the cryonics industry would like to give you the past.
Oh, wait a minute. Read this in the microphone. The cryonics industry. It's an industry, right? They're doing this all over the world now. People making huge fortunes freezing people. Of course, when they're frozen, they're dead for sure, right? And they're not going to bring them back to life in the future. Go ahead.
So when an 87-year-old Californian man was wheeled into an operating room just outside the Phoenix last year, the pandemic was at its height and the medical protocols were being upended across the country. A case like his would normally have required 14 or more bags of fluids to be pumped into him, but now that posed a problem. Had he been infected with the coronavirus, tiny aerosol droplets could have escaped and infected staff, so the operating team had adopted new procedures that reduced the effectiveness of the treatment but used fewer liquids.
So in other words, they're saying they come up with this phony reason to avoid freezing the body because they might get infected by the coronavirus. So they're going to avoid freezing the body and just freeze his brain, right? Go ahead.
It was an elaborate workaround, especially considering the patient had been declared legally dead more than a day earlier. He had arrived in the operating room,
In the cryonics
it's Alker Life Extension Foundation, located in an industrial park near the airport in Scottsdale, Arizona, packed in dry ice and ready to be cryopreserved, or stored in deep freeze temperatures in the hope that one day, perhaps decades or centuries from now, he could be brought back to life.
So perhaps in the hope, all speculation, and centuries from now, there won't be any factory with frozen people centuries from now. They would have gone bankrupt. In fact, the first company that did this went bankrupt, and they unfroze the people, and they were all dead.
As it turns out, though the pandemic has affected billions of lives around the world, has also had an impact on the non-living. From Moscow to Phoenix and from China to rural Australia, the major players in the business of preserving bodies at extremely low temperatures say that the pandemic has brought new stresses to an industry that has long faced skepticism or outright hostility from medical and legal establishments that have dismissed it as a quack science or fraud.
Yeah, so in other words, people know this, so it's nonsense what they're doing. But they're doing it all over the world now. They have these cryonic factories all over the world. They're freezing people, and you know how much it costs to get frozen per year? More than $150,000. Now, you have to be very rich to do this, and your family you must have enough money to put in a bank that'll last for what, centuries? $150,000 a year? I mean, these are people who have billions of dollars. They're the only ones that can afford this, right?
In the case of
that just shows how dumb they are. And selfish, read a little bit more. It's very entertaining to hear all this nonsense.
So they're now talking about that business. Alker, which has been in business since 1972, adopted new rules in its operating room last year that restricted the application of its medical grade anti-freeze solution to only the patient's brain.
They put this in cars, right? Anti-freeze?
Leaving everything below the neck unprotected. So
yes, in other words, now, because of coronavirus, they're not actually trying to preserve the body. They're just trying to preserve the brain. They make it sound like it's all scientific. This is like total nonsense. 100% nonsense, but yet, it's news. Okay, that's enough. You don't have to read anymore. And they teach this stuff in schools also, right? As if it's science. Okay, so anyway, we'll stop right there. We had a little comic interlude, and we'll continue again tomorrow. Are there any questions about this purport?
Maharaj, I guess I would like to look for the specific reference wherein, when Lord Krishna appears first initial in the Narayana form, but then again upon the
Well, that's
request.
in Bhagavad Gita. That's in Bhagavad Gita, 4th chapter.
So my question is,
Yeah.
when you said like Lord Krishna in his original form, he is in that Tribhanga form. Is that Brahma Samhita the reference, or is there somewhere else also
Well,
in his original form?
well, the tree-bending form is described in Brahma Samhita. It's also described in Srimad Bhagavatam. Yeah. You want to know exactly where? Okay. 1 second. Okay, I'll tell you tomorrow. All right.
Yeah, sure.
In class tomorrow. I don't want to spend time looking for it. We read it today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was-
But no, I'll give you the references exactly tomorrow. Okay. Yeah.
On
Yeah.
the question of the freezing, so they are billionaires, they have a lot of money. Definitely they are smarter than normal people, they know how to make money. But how come they are taking this wrong, like very silly decision to freeze themselves, even though they are very smart?
Because
Their body attachment.
because they only have a bodily conception of life. They don't accept the existence of the soul. They think they're just body. And they go to all these crazy extremes, you know, even to be frozen after they're dead, right? And they're insisting on it, and they're insisting on paying all this money, $150,000 a year, right? So, and then they're talking about, you know, it might take centuries before they unfreeze them. Well, their money's going to run out way before that, right? So the whole thing is ridiculous. That just shows how stupid they are, right? If they had any brain, they would read Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita. But no, they ignore it completely and do all these silly things. Even there are other scientists that think that this cryonics is just a bunch of crazy stuff. You know, it's not science. It's just you freeze someone, you think they're going to be alive when you unfreeze them? No. Haribol. There are a whole bunch of animals and human beings that were frozen in Siberia. You know, hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago. When they unfreeze them, they're not alive, they're dead. So how is it they're going to be alive when they get frozen with sub-zero nitrogen? You know, it's just crazy. Good.
Prabhupada Jaya 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 Prabhupada
श्री गुरु चरण पद्म केवल भक्ति सद्मा
श्री गुरु चरण पद्म केवल भक्ति सद्मा
बंदो मुई सावधान मते
बंदो मुई सावधान मते
जाहर प्रसादे भाई ए भवतुरिया जाए
जहर प्रसादे ए भवतुरिया जाए
कृष्ण प्राप्ति होए जहाँ आते कृष्ण प्राप्ति श्री गुरु गुरुमुख पद्म वाक्य चिते ते कोरिया ऐख गुरुमुख पद्म वाक्य चिते ते कोरिया ऐख अर्ना कोरी हो मने आसार न करी हो आसा श्री गुरु चरणे रति ऐसे उत्तम गति श्री गुरु चरणे रति गति जे प्रसादे पूरे सर्व आशा जे प्रसादे पूरे सर्व
You have to turn it on, it's off.
चक्युदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से 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 दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो प्रेम भक्ति जहा होइते अविद्या विनाश जते प्रेम भक्ति जहा होइते अविद्या विनाश जते प्रेम भक्ति जहा होइते अविद्या विनाश जते प्रेम भक्ति जहा होइते अविद्या विनाश वेदे गाय जहर चरितो वेदे गाय जहर चरितो वेदे गाय जहर चरितो जनर बंधु श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनर बंधु श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनर बंधु श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनर बंधु लोकना लोकेर जीवाना लोकना लोकनाथ लोकेर जीवाना लोकनाथ लोकेर जीवाना आहा प्रभु कोरो दया देहो मोरे पाद छया प्रभु कोरो दया देहो मोरे पाद छया আহা প্রভু করো দয়া দেহ মোরে পাদ ছয়া
প্রভু কর দয়া দেয়া মোরে
পাদ
পাদ
ছয়া এবে যশ ঘোষক ত্রিভুবানা এবে যশ ত্রিভুবানা এবে যশ ঘোষক ত্রিভুবানা এবে যশ ঘোষক ত্রিভুবানা প্রভুপাদ ইলো শরণ প্রভুপাদ ইলো শরণ জয় প্রভুপাদ জয় প্রভুপাদ জয় প্রভুপাদ জয় প্রভুপাদ জয়
প্রভুপাদ জয় প্রভুপাদ জয় প্রভুপাদ জয় প্রভুপাদ
জয় গুরুদেবা জয় গুরুদেবা জয় গুরুদেবা জয় গুরুদেবা জয়
গুরুদেবা জয় গুরুদেবা জয় গুরুদেবা জয় গুরুদেবা
নমো বিষ্ণুপদায় कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामीति नामिने
विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी
नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे
नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे
जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद
श्री अद्वैत
गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे निताय गौर हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल
जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस प्रवाचक Shri Maha's Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Anantakuti Vaishnavindi ki jai, Namacharya so Haridas Thakur ki jai, Prem Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Vaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Shri Mayapura Dham ki jai, Shri Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai, Tulasi Devi ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Ganga Maya ki jai, Jamuna Maya ki jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the Sambhaguru. All glories to the Sambhaguru. All glories to the Sambhaguru. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga. All glories to Prabhupada ki jai. Bhaktivedanta Swami Janame Namaste Saraswati Devi Guru The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain the pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross ocean suffering and attain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendence. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him ecstatic karma emanates, by him ignorance is destroyed. The vague scriptures skewed. Our spiritual master, devotional mercy, friend of the poor and Lord of the Lord. O Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shape of the Your fame is spread throughout all the 30 worlds. We take shelter of Lotus Street. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Among